It is now time for Diary of a Wrestling Fan with Bill Chase. And now, here he is, the man who actually remembers a time where much music played, well, music, Bill Chase. Thank you, Mr. Podcast Announcer. Bill Chase here with another episode of Diary of a Wrestling Fan, the podcast that chronicles my 33 amazing years of being a fan of professional wrestling. I invite you to take a trip down memory lane with me. Today is going to be an awesome one. We're going to be talking about Summerslam 1997 and all that led up to it. Of course, that was the night where Bret the Hitman Hart, spoiler alert, became WWF champion for a fifth and final time. Of course, this Bret Hart was different from the one that I grew up supporting, and not necessarily a bad thing. But before we get to that, I want to give a quick shout out, of course, to Pro Wrestling Ontario. From bell to bell, match to match, and show by show, beginning to end, PWO, Pro Wrestling Ontario, produces some of the best competition around. Sees some amazing talents that the Ontario indie scene has to offer. Check us out on social media. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Give us a follow or a like. Also, we are here on YouTube. If you're listening to this on YouTube, subscribe. The link is in the corner of the video. Check it out, but make sure you check it out after you listen to the podcast. And if you're not listening on YouTube, thank you for listening on Anchor, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are streamed. Either way, just thank you for tuning in. And yes, indeed, today we're talking about that historic night, August 3rd, 1997. There's a pay-per-view party happening in the rec room on our house on Lawfield Drive when I was 14 years old to watch Bret the Hitman Hart battle another one of my favorites, all-time favorites, The Undertaker, who was the current WWF champion at that time. So going back, I think we should begin this whole thing with the way the Hart Foundation was formed. So the guard was changing in professional wrestling. Clearly with the NWO in WCW, people were looking for something more than what they've gotten in recent years from the world of wrestling. The business itself had been on a steady decline, despite still having a strong TV audience, but not strong enough to really sustain any draws at house shows or even some of the TV tapings and episodes of Raw and Superstars were not drawing the best numbers either. But at the same time, though, I didn't really know a lot of this stuff back then, as I mentioned before on this podcast in this era, but I had again, a little article I would read in the Toronto Sun and a hotline I would call on Spectel, which is our local newspaper's news hotline. Other than that, I really didn't know much else, but they gave you quite a fair bit of information of what was happening. But I did know that Raw was losing the Monday Night War. You wouldn't know it here in Canada, but that's how it was going. And they needed to shift in a different direction. And looking back in hindsight, you could see that when Bret returned, there was a lot of fanfare. The ratings popped for the week he came back. And then there's just back to the status quo, if you will. And he entered a feud with somebody, of course, I don't even need to tell you, it was Stone Cold Steve Austin. It was a feud. And, people can argue with me all they want with this. It's a feud that, to me, helped ignite the Attitude Era. Now, I'm not saying they were the only reason why the Attitude Era launched. Some people might try to say that's not necessarily true. There were a lot of contributing factors that ultimately led to the Attitude Era emerging as it did. But this was one of them. This feud between Bret Hart and Steve Austin was one of those feuds. And to me, it's one of my all-time favorite feuds. It tells a great story of two men, just trying to be the best. But yet the way one gets under the other's skin is getting to that longtime hero who has a chip on his shoulder now because of this. Because has wrestling passed him by? Have these stars such as Steve Austin and Shawn Michaels truly taken the spot that he has secured and held over all these years since the early 90s? Obviously that's how I interpreted the story. Obviously, we have all our own interpretations, but at the same time, it was a feud that changed the trajectory of the business, especially with the way no double turn has been executed better, no pun intended, executed better than it was at WrestleMania 13 when these two engaged in my all-time favorite match, the submission match at WrestleMania 13, Bret winning, Bret ultimately turning heel, which has been built up for several months. No, sorry, I shouldn't say several months, several weeks, I should say. Probably since the Rumble, at least the 97 Rumble was when it really started kicking into high gear. and Austin becoming the rebellious babyface. Because again, the culture of the '90s was changing. People wanted to see someone who was they wanted to cheer the bad guy, the anti-hero. You know what I mean? It's why even years like a couple years after this, characters such as Tony Soprano would become popular and be rooted for. Even long after that, long after The Sopranos, you have Walter White in Breaking Bad. Again, it's the culture of entertainment. It's time to cheer for the bad guy sometimes. Because the bad guy, he may be a bad guy, but he's not lying, and he may be doing some deceitful things, but really he's making some good points, and he's acting the way that we feel the world should be right now, just tough and no nonsense. And Steve Austin definitely captured a lot of that. And this was long before he was giving Vince McMahon stunners every week. This was at least about 6 months before that. And it did signify a change in wrestling. Long Gone was becoming the traditional babyface. And Bret even was his reluctance to turn, though. He did sum it up best in the Wrestling with Shadows documentary that you can only, I'm paraphrasing here, but you can only save the girl from the railroad tracks so many times before people get bored of it. And then, of course, Bret's said many times since that, he looks at the list of opponents he has as a face, and then he looks at what he has as a heel. As a heel, it was a lot more intriguing to him, and he felt that he could do better that way. And he was right. Because if Bret tried to be a face the rest of 1997, mind you, if that happened, probably the screw job might not have happened, but we'll never know. Oh yes, I'm doing an episode of that in November. We'll look out for that. But it's a matter of he wants to prolong his career. I mean, at this point, Bret is pushing 40. He's going to be 40 in July of '97, and he wasn't washed up by any means. If anything, he was at his peak. That's the funny thing about it. He was actually having some of the best matches of his career at this point, and he was again just on more often than not. Mind you, he always was, but still, it just seems like he was firing on almost literally all cylinders at this point. Bret's even criticized himself for not being the strongest promo, but even before he fully turned, he was getting really excellent work on the mic, I thought. And those angry promos he was cutting, the bitterness he was starting to get towards the fans even before he chewed them out the night after WrestleMania 13 was, Bret was really exploring a whole new dynamic of himself. And I find that's one of the things I find in the world of wrestling that I've learned, not only just watching all these years, but even seeing it unfold before my very eyes, even just on the indie circuit, that a lot of these guys will make tweaks to their character, to their persona, to even what they do in the ring, to keep themselves fresh, to keep themselves intriguing to the fans, to keep their brand alive, so hey, they can sell that merch. And no, that's not even a backhanded comment. That is true. I mean, merchandise makes you money. And on the independent circuit, a lot of guys, they thrive on that. But even in the WWF, I'm sure Bret or whoever else wants to sell merch because that's money in their pocket too. And even back then being a heel, it was at this point where you could still sell merch as a heel. Why? Because Bret was not an ordinary heel, which just brings me to my next point. So the heel turn Bret undertook, again, no pun intended, was that he was pro-Canadian. He was even pro-world. He actually still praised his international fans in Germany, South Africa, Japan, and wherever. But he denounced the United States fans. That was it. That was literally it. He said how proud he was to be a Canadian. He criticized American quote-unquote values, and he still stayed true to his Canadian pride. And what the beauty of it was that nothing like it had really been done, at least not on such a large scale. Bret was universally getting jeered and booed and having probably, I would dare say, even he had a lot of heat when he tagged with the Anvil back in the mid 80s when they were heels as the Hart Foundation tag team. Almost as much heat. Maybe even a little more now that Bret was a main event guy. That's the only reason I say that. Not to say the Hart Foundation didn't have heat, because they did, but they were also liked in some places too, but I digress. Point is, Bret was not liked really anywhere in America. He still had his following in the Northeast, like New York and that. He still had his following in that region. They never fully booed him there, but that is what it is, because Bret has just become such a legend in that region, and that being literally WWF country. But when he went to Canada, he was cheered louder than he'd ever been before. And that's the thing. He'd always had, even before he was doing this, he had a large following in Canada, obviously, because we saw him as our guy. This guy's Canadian. And Americans make fun of us because we don't have many celebrities or athletes to get behind. And the thing is, I hate to admit it, and I may take flack for this, other than hockey, and there's been a lot of great Canadian musicians such as Rush, and at the time, whether you're a fan of her or not, Celine Dion was one of the most popular recording artists in the world. She was Canadian, but granted, the mainstream fame in North America, it was dominated by Americans. That's just a fact, even among athletes. Okay, it's not. I am proud of our Canadian athletes and the ones who succeeded, and I'm proud of the actors like Jim Carrey who have succeeded greatly. And again, this is 1997. Jim Carrey was the king of the box office. Liar Liar had just come out around this time. It was a huge hit. Again, you think again, losing track here. Okay, athletes again. The only one, but however, the most popular athlete at this time, Gretzky was still popular, yes. Even so was Mario Lemieux. Donovan Bailey, track and field gold medalist Donovan Bailey, was at this point more popular in my opinion. As experiencing this as a kid, Donovan Bailey was more popular than any Canadian athlete at this point. So as time had gone on, however, now here's how I was thinking. Okay, so after Bret did his speech, did his heel promo on Raw on the night after WrestleMania 13. I didn't necessarily disagree with what he was saying, and it wasn't just because I was Canadian, but the way Bret had been acting in the weeks prior to this, it just still sounded like he was whining. Like, that's how I saw him. Bret's my all-time favorite wrestler, and it just sounded disappointing in some ways. But yet, while I agreed with what he was saying, I was happy that he was being pro-Canadian. I was also starting to like Steve Austin around this time. I didn't particularly care for Shawn Michaels at this point. To me, even though I cheered him while he was the champion in that, I felt something about him was starting to bother me. And I'm not known, and again, I didn't know much about I knew a little bit about the Clique. I knew little bits and pieces here and there, but I didn't know enough to hate him that much. It was from a character standpoint, his on-air character. For some reason, it just got grating after a while. For some reason, it's just me coming into my teen years. I don't know. I just wasn't digging that, but Shawn wasn't doing it for me. So I was actually cheering when he attacked Shawn during that interview. But Bret, to me, was still coming off as a bit of a whiner. So I was kind of mixed on it. Like, what's Bret doing? But at the same time, he's doing this thing for Canada. And then as time had gone on, I was starting to warm up to more of what Bret was doing. To me, it was still whining a bit, but he was not, it took me a few weeks on it. And then I remember my cousin Jamie, he was telling me, him and Wayne, they were both saying how they loved this whole new persona of Bret's. They loved how he was this pro-Canadian hero. But I'm like, yeah, but he's kind of whining, though. Like, I would say that. I was mixed on it, to say the least. I didn't cheer against Bret at all. But mind you, he did get injured shortly after this, so there wasn't really many matches I could cheer against him. And it is true, though. At this point, because again, I remember, this was around the time, too, the rivalry between Donovan Bailey, who I just mentioned, and Michael Johnson. And they had an unsanctioned race, which means it didn't have any effect on their standing in the statistically in the world or whatever. But it was at the Skydome in Toronto, and it was the world's fastest man who determined who the world's fastest man is, because they've been calling each other out for a while. And the whole country beamed with pride when Bailey beat him. Now, Johnson said he pulled his hamstring, which I still call bullshit on this to this day. Maybe it's just my Canadian pride getting in the way, because, again, I supported so many Canadian athletes at this point. And because he won the 400-meter not that long after, in the same year. This was in the summer. So I'm like, he's full of crap. He just gave up because he knew Bailey was kicking his ass, and Bailey was beating him. And when you see him, he wasn't really hobbling after, full of shit. He's just trying to save face because he got his ass kicked. I still think that to this day. Yeah, Michael Johnson, I doubt you're listening, but if by chance this gets back to you, you're a loser. Bailey beat you. I sound like I'm just sorry, I'm just reliving my 14-year-old self. So much so, and I'm fast forwarding a bit here, but so much so, we bought the Bailey versus Johnson T-shirt. My parents bought it for me. I think at Sports Check, store in our local mall, and I wore that to Florida just to rub it in all their faces because Michael Johnson was a great track and field star. He's one of the best of all time, in my opinion. I'll even go as far to say that Michael Johnson's one of the best runners of all time. But there was a time Donovan Bailey was better than him. It may not have been too long, maybe only been like a year or two, but Donovan Bailey was better than him for a long time, in my opinion. But anyway, I know it's easier on a chair quarterback, but whatever. As like as a fan watching that race at the time, I was just so glad Bailey beat him. But yeah, that's I mean like it was around the time of that race, the hype for it, and watching the hype for that Canadian Stampede pay per view that Bret Hart and the Hart Foundation headlined against a team of American wrestlers in Calgary. Seeing the magic of that, seeing the pride that Bret was bringing to the wrestling fans of this country, it made me smile. It was that night when he walked down the aisle with Owen Hart, the British Bulldog, Jim the Anvil Neidhart, and Brian Pillman that I beamed with such Canadian pride. He was like a soldier going into battle, a soldier marching on to the enemy. And from there on in, I never doubted. I didn't have mixed feelings anymore. I was fully behind him 110% after that. No ifs, ands, or buts. And then I was, of course, like for Summerslam. Now, The Undertaker was my other guy. But this night I had to go against him. Because the way I saw it as a fan back then was that Bret was bringing the title back to Canada. That he was fighting for this title for us. And watching his journey being, no pun intended, screwed out of the title time and time again. We were all behind him. And by that I mean myself, my cousins, even my dad, who was not into this, into wrestling much anymore, wanted Bret to be the champion again. Enjoyed the whole storyline with Bret being the Canadian hero. So SummerSlam approached. The best time of summer is I can have all the cousins over, that we could all watch the pay-per-view together. And so it was the big pay-per-view party that summer. Now the show itself was quite a show they put together. Every match had a stipulation, pretty much. There was it was all the Hart Foundation matches, more or less. Okay, so the stipulation for the Bret match with The Undertaker was that if Bret lost, he could never wrestle in the United States again. And at a famous Raw in Halifax, Nova Scotia, where Shawn Michaels sickened me, a little prick, putting mini Canadian flags down his pants, was made the guest referee. And of course, him and Bret, their rivalry goes without words. And said if he didn't ref the match right down the middle, he would never wrestle in the United States again. So this match had a lot going behind it. Now, the weird thing is that a lot of people don't remember this because, again, even with Bret Hart and The Undertaker together, even in these rough times where they're losing to WWE in the ratings war, people are going to pay attention. SummerSlam drew one of their better pay-per-view buys that year, from what I understand. And while it didn't do an astronomical number, it still did really well for the time. The Undertaker and Bret weren't interacting too much on TV. If I recall, Taker was barely on TV at this point. Weird for the champion. Taker's focus was more on Kane, even though Kane hadn't debuted yet. The whole thing, Paul Bearer saying Kane is alive. Now that was happening at this point, and we were actually, I was remember being captivated by that. Like, who's Kane? Who could this Kane be? Yeah, they built that up really well. Bret and the Hart Foundation had their rivalries, but their primary rival was Stone Cold Steve Austin. That included Bret himself, and Bret's rivalry with Shawn seemed to take more precedent here. But Bret's quest for the title was very was easy for me to say, was made known by Bret. And they brought in the Patriot. In the go home show before SummerSlam, Bret lost the Patriot thanks to Shawn Michaels. Again, that built us, Shawn's not going to be fair at SummerSlam. He's going to find a way to screw Bret out of the title, we're thinking. So then came the big day. That infamous Raw in Halifax, which we all loved. There was myself, my cousins Jamie, Wayne, my cousin Mike, who's about 9 at the time, my cousin Corey, who, was 9 as well. We were all there for this. We were psyched for this. So then came the big day. There it is, the big night. SummerSlam 97. I remember Heart and Soul was the tagline. One of the best posters they ever put together. It was an amazing poster with like a purple cloud, fog, or whatever, smoke, whatever you want to say it is, of The Undertaker, in the background where Bret's just standing there. It had a big match feel. Say what you want about the WWF losing to WCW at this point, but WWF had an intriguing product. They have improved drastically since 1996. Like I said, every match had a stipulation pretty much regarding the Hart Foundation matches. We just talked about Bret's. If Owen Hart was defending the title against Stone Cold Steve Austin, if Austin were to lose, he'd have to kiss Owen's ass. I'm not making this up. That was the stipulation. If Ken Shamrock were to beat the British Bulldog for the European title, then you'd have to eat there's the dog food stipulation. That's right, the dog food stipulation. I almost forgot. The Bulldog would eat a can of dog food. If Brian Pillman lost to Goldust, Pillman would have to wear a dress on Raw the next night. And if any member of the Hart Foundation lost, Jim the Anvil Neidhart would shave his trademark beard. And Anvil didn't even have a match. And even other than this, you had the cage match between Triple H and Mankind. So that was what opened the show, was the cage match. I'd never seen a cage match open a show, and I think Hell in a Cell match opened up Hell in a Cell pay-per-views, but really it hasn't happened much since then. The Triple H and Mankind actually had a really good rivalry at this point. It started at the King of the Ring, where Triple H beat Mankind, and pretty much just beat him down to kind of prove a point at the end of the match, and then it just started this big rivalry. They had that nice brawl at the Canadian Stampede pay-per-view a month before this, and it was just a nice personal little rivalry that these two had had. Little did I know this time how big this rivalry would become a couple years later. How much money these two would draw together. But anyway, I digress. So yeah, it was, for me at the time, I liked Mankind. I liked him back when he was Cactus Jack in WCW. So I always was intrigued by his character. His character always drew me in, even when he was feuding with The Undertaker, even though obviously I was booing him and hated him. But since King of the Ring, this around the time he was doing those interviews with Jim Ross. And I thought, again, as a fan watching, you're thinking, this is interesting. This is a whole new thing they're exploring here. It made Mankind this demonic character, this like maniac. human. It made him like a. It's like to me, it's like he was a maniac for a reason. It's like yeah, he's crazy, he's nuts, and he's psychotic, but there's a reason for it. And I wasn't the only one. A lot of fans were getting behind him at this time. I remember my cousins were starting to really get into Mankind at this point too. I think they really liked the fact that he took all these crazy bumps and was just that's the way he wrestled in the ring. Plus, they hated Triple H. We all hated Triple H. He was just annoying. At that point, we just like I remember. I think it was either Jamie or Wayne. I think it was Jamie. He's like they made him king of the ring. He said. So the two engaged in a cage match, which was really good. Now, at the time, Mankind had debuted the Dude Love character just a few weeks before this, winning the tag titles with the reluctant partner Stone Cold Steve Austin. So the whole Three Faces of Foley thing was coming to fruition. Cactus Jack was still just over a month away. But again, this is what was getting people behind Mankind, this whole dynamic behind him. And I remember us watching the match and just seeing some like crazy stuff going on that made like this crazy bumps and shots that Mankind's taking into the cage and just made us cringe, but like this guy's nuts. And then although Wayne pointed out, I remember Wayne actually pointed out, he said he did a lot of this stuff when he was Cactus Jack. And he was right. So Mankind won the match. And we were happy that. But the show was off to a good start. But we were anxious for the Hart Foundation stuff. We were still anxious for Taker and Bret. Now, I remember one of the things that we were going on around this time, too. Now, so I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but it just popped in my head right now. This is when the gang wars were starting. And by that, I mean there was a feud between the Nation of Domination plus two excommunicated members of the Nation, Crush and Savio Vega, start their own factions, the Disciples of Apocalypse and Los Barriquas, respectively. Now, here's the thing: now people look back on this era or this feud, the gang wars, as not very good, and with good reason. Because I don't know, something about it just didn't really connect. But the common misconception is that these guys did not get over. The Nation had heat on them. They did. Like, say what you want about the Nation, they had heat on them. DOA, they were over. I remember DOA getting really good reactions. To me, DOA didn't really start fading away, like in terms of getting good babyface reactions until Crush left the company a few months later, just after the screw job. After he left, that's when I felt they lost their babyface momentum. That's even me on the surface as a fan. Because I remember them getting pretty good reactions. So again, that just popped in my head because that was one of the big things happening on television. It was this whole thing was getting a lot of television time. Now, keep in mind though, with the Nation at this point, The Rock hadn't joined them quite yet. The Rock was, I think, a week or two away from returning. But no, anyway, on with the show. So Goldust and Brian Pillman. Now, this feud was very interesting. With Pillman playing the mind games, the mind games on Goldust. Goldust now was known for the mind game. It was the big buzzword, buzzphrase, whatever, that Vince McMahon would use and coaches would use to strike Goldust playing the mind games on his opponents. And Pillman, though, the loose cannon character, could also be a little psychological. It hadn't really gotten as intense as it would until after this, but it was still heating up at the point of the Pillman making allusions to Marlena, who he had a relationship with years before this, before her and Goldust got together. Marlena, of course, I'm sure 99.9% of you know Terry Runnels. So the match itself, and it's in hindsight, it's sad to say this now, but I remember I said to Wayne because Wayne, well, like Wayne and Jamie watched WCW quite a bit in the like the early '90s. Mike hadn't really. Mike was really young, still same with Corey. But I remember I said to Wayne, I said Pillman has slowed down considerably. Now, granted, I knew that Pillman had the leg injury, the ankle injury, and I was just saying this kind of matter of factly, not trying to be mean spirited or insult his skill or anything like that. Because I love Pillman. I did at that point. I did early in his career, and I did right up till he died, which was sadly only a few months after this. 2 months actually. And in hindsight, it's almost like I regret saying that, but that was again a big thing that came up quite a bit, even in hindsight. That the things that made him so good, he wasn't able to do anymore. As a 14-year-old kid, it's not as ignorant to say as it would be as a 37-year-old man I am now, and it's sad that I had to say that at that time. It's me being a 14-year-old kid who knows nothing about medical issues. Granted, I'm 37, I barely know anything, but I'm not a doctor or a nurse or in the medical field, but I'm a little less naive than I was then. But me just being in my blissful teenage ignorance, thinking that the surgery would fix everything. I remember him and Goldust having a very entertaining match. Pillman lost, of course, which was no surprise. We were kind of laughing at the fact that Pillman's got the word dress on Raw. We thought it was amusing. And we're thinking, oh, Amble's going to have to shave his beard now. Already one member of the Hart Foundation lost. There you go. Then after that, it was the Legion of Doom against the Godwins. Now, hindsight in this era has not been kind to the Road Warriors or LOD. Honestly, I still thought they were a badass. I guess that's the beauty of being a fan that young at this point, where I knew about I rented tapes of them in the NWA and AWA and all that when they were just the shit kickers who would destroy anything and everything. And while they were still badass, they weren't the same guys they were. Like you and I knew they weren't the same guys they were in, like they worked for Crockett. But I still thought these guys were awesome. And the feud with the Godwins made perfect sense. I mean, they just had a simple competitive match on an episode of Shotgun. I wasn't even Raw, I don't think. On Shotgun, and Henry had a severe neck injury because of the Doomsday device. Makes perfect sense. The Godwins turn heel, which to me, and again, this is one of those unpopular viewpoint or opinion or whatever things. I actually thought the Godwins were much better as heels. I personally thought that they looked like they were just nasty Southerners naturally, especially Henry, Mark Canterbury, and Dennis Knight. People can say what they want about Dennis Knight, but that guy would commit to anything you gave him, whether it was Phineas Godwin or Naked Midian. As ridiculous as Naked Midian was, hey, the guy committed to it. I gotta give him that. But digressing back to the Godwins, I don't know. I thought they were easily hateable heels. And I watched this match not that long ago, and now on paper, some people might think this would be the drizzling shits. It wasn't. It was actually a pretty solid match. These guys, they had good chemistry. I remember even the match they had on Raw a few months after this, where the LOD would win the tag titles for the final time. I thought that was pretty good. I don't know, something about these two teams clicked. And I don't think the Godwins are near as bad as people say they were. So, I don't know, I enjoyed that match. And I remember cheering hard for the LOD. We all hated the Godwins. Now, that match will admit, like, even though we liked the LOD, we weren't passionate about it. Okay, so here's the thing, too. I forgot to mention that. So, my cousin Jamie, because we had this, like, old chalkboard that just stayed in the basement. I forget how it ended up there. Let me ask my mom. She'd remember. But and we'd use it to do our picks for pay per view. And then there's no money or anything; it was just for fun, just to see who would get the most right. So I think we divided on Mankind Triple H. We all, I think I'm the only one who picked Pillman to beat Goldust, so I lost that one. We all picked the LOD to beat the Godwins, so we all got that one right. But the match that we were really passionate for was the next British Bulldog and Ken Shamrock. The Bulldog had been a fixture in my wrestling fandom for many years, whether it be as the face with the, as Bobby Heenan called it, the Whoopi Goldberg hairdo, or as the heel with the crew cut. Bulldog was a beast. Davey Boy Smith, I don't mind saying, was a beast. And that's the thing. And you look at him like that's the thing. People forget he wasn't a tall guy compared to pretty much most wrestlers at that point. I think even Bret was taller than him, but he was such a tank that nobody really noticed. And that's why he matched up so well with Shamrock. Shamrock, a legit badass UFC, champion, like world's most dangerous man. He was dubbed. And I remember we all split on this one too. Some of us picked Bulldog, some of us picked Shamrock. Shamrock was on a roll. Shamrock hadn't. I don't even think Shamrock had lost on television really at this point. I'm pretty sure. And yeah, Shamrock was well protected at this point, and he'd been on a red hot roll. Remember how he like just dummied Vader back in May? But it was a disqualification win for the Bulldog. The match wasn't really long, but I remember it's pretty good. So this show, like, and again, to me, 1997 WWF, again, a lot of people, just a lot of the casual fan base, say it was time, and it was. In terms of numbers and ratings, WCW was kicking their ass. But people forget, 96, the ratings were worse. 96, the pay per view numbers were worse. 97, they started improving. Your audience started growing. And their overall product was improving. They may not have been beating WCW yet. They were still a while away from that point. But then their audience was growing. So this whole show so far has been like we're really enjoying it. And then came, as I alluded to before, the Gang Wars. It was the Bariquas versus DOA. We did not pay attention to this match. Now, like I said, I admitted the DOA was over, but I honestly, and a lot of us just did not give a shit about any of these factions. We did not care. We only took notice when the Nation interfered. Ahmed Johnson had joined the Nation, which to me, maybe it's hindsight, but I didn't even thought at the time. I remember when Ahmed joined the Nation. He was feuding with them after Farouk put him on the shelf with that kidney injury. Well, you can't beat him, join him. And when they turned Ahmed face not long after this, to me, he never fully recovered after that. To me, whatever momentum he had was gone. He was supposed to face The Undertaker at the Canadian Stampede pay-per-view, but had gotten hurt. And that's what Ahmed Johnson's legacy is. It's either he hurt himself or he hurt others. That's what many say who worked with him at the time. We did not care about this match whatsoever. But then we are right back in the show again with Stone Cold Steve Austin and Owen Hart. Now, this match is famous for one thing, and I'm sure, again, 99.9% of you know what it is. But people actually forget how great a match this really was. Again, I watched it not that long ago. It was a freaking awesome match. These two had amazing chemistry. And it's not like it's a surprise, really. It's Stone Cold Steve Austin and Owen Hart. Of course, it's going to kick 99 levels of ass and then one more. But of course, that infamous moment where Owen went for a tombstone. Now, Owen Hart's one of the finest workers ever. I will boldly say that. One of the best ever, along with his brother, in terms of between the bell. I don't know if whether it was human error, because hey, even the best of them make mistakes. Owen dropped on his ass, and there was actually a picture in WWF magazine where it shows the actual pile driver in midair. Steve's head is well below Owen's. Okay, so the picture was taken from behind. You can still see Steve's head under Owen. Right there, if you were to see that still picture as it was happening, Steve's fucked. Owen dropped on his ass. Usually a tombstone is when you drop on your knees. Steve had the neck injury that pretty much changed his whole career. And we're watching this and we're looking at it, and we didn't think much of it at first. We just thought Owen was being healed by stalling. And we're sort of saying over, why is no one covered? Why is no one going for the pin? And I'm thinking, oh shit, I think that tombstone might have fucked him up. And as we're looking at Austin crawl, and then the worst roll up of all time, we looked at each like we're all looking at each other. Yeah, his neck is done. So it was scary because even like seeing it, even as we saw it happen, we're like, ooh, like we all cringed, right? But like we just cringed as always, like a graphic looking move, like we would like anything else. We didn't think he was hurt. But yeah, no, that's what I mean. The neck injury that changed everything for him. He still had the career he had, even. He's lucky he even had that. But before I get to the main event, I have to mention the SummerSlam $1 million giveaway. Now, for weeks on TV, they'd be giving these random clues. And then there was a board of, on the show, there was a board of 100 keys on it. The two contestants picked the keys. So Todd Pettengill, I actually should mention this was Todd Pettengill's last pay per view. I think yeah, I don't think I saw that. He was gone, and Michael Cole pretty much came on board. So the two contestants. This was just so confusing. One number was disconnected. The first number doesn't answer. The third call is someone who's not watching the show. That's embarrassing. But the key doesn't open the money. Another person answers the phone. Yeah, it was a fiasco. Only notable for Sunny and Sable looking pretty damn good. God, this was so good. I know I'm leaving out things here, but this is where I remember off by my head. I remember they hyped this up on TV for weeks. So what's his name? That Bob Collins or whatever. There's an obscure reference for it. Was giving out clues, I think, every week on Raw. So anyway, I figure I just at least had to mention that. It was terrible. It would even been more. The guy who wasn't watching the pay per view, if he would have said something like, "Oh no, I'm saving my money for Road Wild," so funny. I'm saving my money for WCW Road Wild. Or no, I spent all my money on Bash at the Beach. Oh God, I think of these things too much. Anyway, main event: Bret Hart and The Undertaker. big match feel here. Bret comes out, and we're psyching up. Yeah, yeah. There's Bret carrying the Canadian flag, and he's got some mad heat on him from that New Jersey crowd. And he does "O Canada." Now, when he did "O Canada," honest to God, I even said, now Jamie had already started doing it because Jamie's very patriotic. He still is to this day. We all stood. I said to Wayne, Corey, and Mike, stand up, stand up. They're playing our anthem. We did. We actually stood up out of respect. A couple of us were wearing hats. We removed our hats for the national anthem. Now we're also speculating. I remember looking at the boys saying, Kane's going to debut tonight. Paul Bearer had admitted Kane was alive on a recent episode of Raw. And I remember the match at the time being long, but I was into it. Like they still had us intrigued who was going to win. They had us on their every move. In hindsight, this sadly pales in comparison. Now, it was a great match. Even watching it now, it's still a fantastic match. But the one they had in London, in England, a month and a half or so after this, blew this out of the water. So maybe that's why I look at it differently now. But at the time, we were just like right into it. And Shawn being referee, plus the interferences or the Paul Bear saunters down the ringside. I remember nudging one of them on the shoulder, being like, Kane's coming, Kane's coming. But of course, he did not. Taker pretty much took care of Bearer. Hart Foundation came down. They were taken care of as well. And even Shawn's refereeing, like the whole story of him not being the best referee would tie into things him later. So then that memorable finish where Bret brings in the chair. Shawn had taken a bit of a bump, but of course, since he's a wrestler, he's not knocked out. Not the typical ref bump. But Shawn's still selling it kind of, right? So he's not really paying attention to what's going on. And then Bret brings in the chair, continues stomping away on Taker. Shawn grabs the chair. We're like, we like all kind of freeze. Oh shit, he's gonna nail Bret. And we're all like, we're not even talking at this point. We don't say a word because Shawn keeps questioning Bret about the chair. Bret finally gets fed up. Bret spits on Shawn. We all go, ooh. Shawn takes a swing. I swear, we all ducked just like Bret did. I'm not kidding. We were with Bret every step of the way vicariously here. And then we saw him nail Taker. We're like, oh my God. See Bret Hart, like, oh, Shawn's got to count. Shawn's got to count. He's got to be unbiased. Most reluctant 3 count in wrestling history. We all jump, high five at each other. I had a Canadian flag in that basement, and we're lifting it up. We're just going crazy. It was like we won the gold medal in hockey. Shawn storms off. We see Taker get up, walk like saunter to the back, like he's looking for Shawn. Bret with the title. The Hart Foundation joins him. Glorious moment for Canada. Again, we were beaming with Canadian pride. Bret's 5th title win. Then, after the dust had settled, the show went off the air. I remember I looked at Wayne and Mike. Oh my God, you know what this means? They're like, what? The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels are going to feud now. We thought that was freaking awesome because they hadn't feuded. Here they were, 2 of the biggest stars. Like again, despite the rough times for this company, there were some big stars. Bret, Shawn, Taker. But yet somehow, despite the fact that they'd been employed together for nearly 7 years at this point, they had never had an actual feud. From what I had read online, as there's a couple results pages, they did work a house show together in 1995, where Taker I think won by countout. But they have not feuded on TV. They never had a match on television, and it was a match I'd always wanted to see. So I was psyched for that. And I remember as the show went off the air because my dad was out at the time with my uncle, so we're speculating, well, who's Bret going to face now? Because we're thinking he's probably going to face Shawn right after this. But no, Shawn's probably going to feud with The Undertaker now. Now, I don't know why, but for some reason I guessed Mankind. But then I thought about it, I'm like, well, wait, the Patriot. As soon as I said the Patriot, they all groaned. No disrespect to Del Wilkes, who played the Patriot. Great wrestler. But as 14-year-old kids, I think we just want to see our hero at least face a challenge of someone that, was, I don't know, not the Patriot. I don't know. I guess this Patriot hadn't been around that long at this point. We don't really see him as something that's significant. But we didn't. I think Jamie said, "What about Austin?" And I thought, "Oh yeah, Austin." But then we're thinking, "Wait, he could be hurt." So that kind of kiboshed that. So yeah, it's probably the Patriot. So it was a triumphant moment being with Canadian pride for us wrestling fans. Fans across Canada, I'm sure, were just delighted Bret was champion. Although, and I don't think I need to really elaborate further because I will come November when I do that episode. You know what I'm talking about. This is about as good as it got for Bret in this run. The peak was probably Canadian Stampede. That moment, that shining moment of Bret's career. A lot of their careers. But the peak still was leveled at this point. Bret was still kind of leveling off. Like you hit a peak and then maybe sometimes you level off. In the SummerSlam, Bret was leveling off. He won the championship, and in Strike While the Iron's Hot, Bret was hot at this point. Don't care what anyone says. All you Shawn Michaels apologists out there can argue until you're blue in the face. I'll tell you right now, you're wrong. But you strike while the iron's hot, and Bret again was hot at this point. The Undertaker had a decent reign. And here's a guy, again, you look at the reputation he has. People complain, and hey, I was one of them, I'm not going to lie, but when CM Punk had to take a back seat to, John Cena and whatnot, Taker took a back seat pretty much most of this reign. Hell, his biggest marquee match is when he lost the damn thing to Bret. That's really the Hart Foundation. The Hart Foundation thing with Steve Austin, Shawn Michaels, and everyone that took center stage on Raw every week. Taker had no. This isn't to say Taker didn't have again. He was much like Punk. Taker had good stuff going. You know what I mean? The rekindling of the feud with Mankind. The feud he started feuding with Austin for the first time. Feud with Farouk was kind of but yeah, Taker had some good, and the Kane thing starting. Paul Bearer trying to blackmail him with a secret. Taker had some good stuff on TV happening. Again, yes, the Hart Foundation was taking center stage, but Taker was right there. That being said, however, they did overshadow his reign that way in terms of spotlight. Spotlight wasn't primarily on the champion. I should say the main event spotlight wasn't primarily on the champion. It was on the Hart Foundation more than anything, and Steve Austin, and whoever the Harts were feeding with. Wow, this was a great trip down. I actually really, really enjoyed. Thank you all for tuning in. If you want to find me on social media, look for me at Bill Chase 33, both on Instagram and Twitter. On Facebook, I'm simply Bill Chase. Send a friend request. I'll chat wrestling with you. Yeah. You can listen on either Anchor, Spotify. Follow me on Spotify. Subscribe, whatever you do. on these podcasting stream services. Just make sure you listen. If you're on YouTube, you're listening to this on YouTube, subscribe. Don't forget to check out Pro Wrestling Ontario. So next week, we're going to fast forward a bit to 2013 going into 2014 when I talk about Daniel Bryan's quest to be the man. That's right. All the way from SummerSlam 2013 to WrestleMania 30. About Daniel Bryan's quest to be the man. So, until next time, this is Bill Chase. Thank you for listening to Diary of a Wrestling Fan. And quoting a wise Hamiltonian when I'm telling you, don't you dare miss it. Thank you for listening to Diary of a Wrestling Fan with Bill Chase. If any of you ladies out there want to contribute to the show, just swipe right when you see Bill on Tinder. He is quite a catch.